Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Book Leads Impactful Books for Life and Leadership. I'm your series host and leadership performance coach, John Giramillo. This podcast series is about getting to the books that have impacted my network, my friends, colleagues, people that I've collaborated with, people that I've met through social media. There's so many people that I've networked only virtually with during the pandemic that I've been lucky enough to bring on. So these are great leads, all these interviews to great books that impact who they are as a person, as a worker, as a business owner, entrepreneur, whatever it is. These great books that have lessons that just kind of touch on all the different areas of our lives. And the way that I do it is in a few categories. The first category is books that they're schooling me on, telling me about that I haven't read. The second category, books that we've both read, whether specifically for this series or that we've read separately in our previous lives. And then the third category is books that are written and or published by my guests that I have on the series. So for this episode, my guest will be Karen Senteio. And Karen is an executive coach and president of Karen Senteio Consulting, which focuses on inspired leading, working, and living. She has spent 30 years of she has 30 years of corporate experience and close to 5 years of work in nonprofits in leadership, project management, change management, facilitating, and encouraging. Karen advocates for life reinvention and believes that a leader must be willing to change their mind and unlearn as well as learn. She works with leaders ready to unapologetically harness their greatest power for the greatest good, activating their internal compass to embody inspiration and courage as daily practice. And I met Karen through networking circles in Hartford, specifically through her work with Leadership Greater Hartford. I've heard her share her story, speak at events, whether online, in person. I've seen the work that she does, and I've had one-on-one conversations with her. Uh, so I figure she's as inspiring a person in our community as you can find just from her work, her experience. So I figured she'd be a great person to bring on this platform, my series, to interview on a book that's impacted her. I always find that those people that inspire me, I want to find out what it is that inspired them. So, Karen, thank you so much for sitting down with me.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be here on the Book Leads talking about something I absolutely love, and that's books, because books change lives.
Absolutely. And Karen, even though I'd heard her name, Brene Brown, I had brought this up to you that you're the reason I started listening to her podcast because, and you said it so yourself that you were a fangirl for Brene Brown and her work. It
Yes.
was just something about how it was, I don't even necessarily think you were the speaker at this particular event, but had raised your hand, you were commenting on what the topic was, and you brought up her book, a point that she had made. Obviously, it had to do with courage, which she speaks a lot about. So thank you for really, again, even though I'd heard her name, really getting me just because I saw how pumped up you were to really listen to her work. I have yet to get started on her books, but I want to first off thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. I hope after you read a couple of her books, you become a fan like I do.
Oh, I am. I mean, just in listening to her, the way she talks,
She's real.
um,
She's absolutely real.
she's real. She's no bullshit. I mean, that's my kind of style, my kind of preference for communication is just getting to the heart of whatever it is the topic is and really speaking your truth in that way. And I love the
That's
way
right.
she brings it. Obviously, it's inspired and impacted you, but getting to you, who are you today? I read your bio, it explains some of your work, but what's some of the work that you're into these days?
So I'm an executive coach, and really, when I take a look at what an executive coach does, it's really a change agent. And so when I think about all the um, roles that I've had through the many years in the 30 plus years in leadership, all of them have had some component of change. And I think that's what I'm hardwired for, is being a facilitator of change, whether on an individual or on an organizational level. I think change changes lives, and without it, we're stuck in the same place. We don't learn. We can't love new things. We are incapable of thinking again without change. So the work that I do facilitates change, and I would say change on a very individual level, because everyone that I meet is different. So what does change mean to them, and what
Yeah.
kind of change do they need to um, make change in their life and also affect the world?
See, I love that you bring that up because it's not a matter of just changing. It's not coming into an organization. It's not coming into a group, working with an individual, Because I've had that with some of the people that I've worked with, where they're kind of like, just tell me what I need to say to
Mhm.
impact them, to lead them. They're not aware, and a lot of it is awareness. They're not aware of like that mentality, that mindset, that it stems from who they are as a person, who they
Absolutely.
are as a leader. So many of them keep that apart from the workplace, or they keep apart even working as a leader themselves, because I always say the leadership work is internal to you first, and then any leadership is communicating, giving that example to other people.
Absolutely. I think leaders need to drop into their values or reconnect with their values if they're going to inspire other folks because you have to be authentic. People can people can spot when you're not authentic. And I don't think a leader can hold on to that inauthentic way for
Mm,
long.
yeah.
Because if you're going to inspire someone, and when you take a look at the difference between motivation and inspiration, and motivation is lighting a fire underneath someone,
Yeah.
and that's necessary.
Of
But
course.
inspiring is lighting the fire within. And I
Oof.
don't believe that you can light that fire within without being authentic, without being in touch with your values, and without understanding the values and what of others and what makes them tick.
Absolutely. Because it can't be a checklist.
It's not.
It can't be a checklist, even if you read a book about the approach to something, right? Um, it can't be just a checklist. You can use a checklist until you find that it's kind of second nature and you get in
That's
that
right.
groove and you pick it up and it becomes a
Mhm.
part of you, or it awakens a piece in you. There's so many times that you read a book and it puts to the page something that you've always thought. It articulates and organizes something that you've always been, but just never were able. That's one of my favorite parts to the book, is like you read something, you're like, holy shit, I'm not crazy. It might have been a certain way that you thought, a certain way that you looked at the
Exactly.
world, but authenticity is one of those things where you hear it all the time. There's like that fear that it's become cliche, but it's weird how it may be written about, but people still need to work at what that really means, and that it's not a checklist, that it takes that inner work.
Absolutely. And when you talk about the inner work, you have to get it in your bones. So, in order for it to get in your bones, you have to be able to read it, let it reach your heart, and then you put it in your toolkit where you can pull it out and use it when it matters and why it matters. And it's the right thing to do at that time. I consider myself a smurgeologist, and John, you'll know that I just make up words all the time. So a
As long as you
smurgeologist,
can
yeah.
back them up with a
Okay,
great
I'm gonna
effing
back it up.
experience, and
I'm
I know
gonna
you
back it up
will,
right now.
but making up words is fine, and I know you're gonna back it up. So hit me with it.
Yeah, so a smurgeologist takes information and what they hear from all different places, whether it's a book, a podcast, children, even something that made them mad. And how do you take it all in and then use it and have it become part of you? A smurgeologist just it creates the connective tissue between multiple
Ah.
books. And this book, A Culture of Safety was one of those books. And that's what I look for. If a book has connective tissue, I'm interested.
I love the fact that you brought up books. I love the fact that you brought up just experiences that you may have. I love the fact that you brought up bad experiences, because I don't think, and we'll get to that in this book. It mentions it. And I love the fact that you brought up kids. It's amazing. I've spoken about. I have a presentation that's based on lessons that I've learned from my toddler. Just living free, having a wild imagination, gauging people. How comfortable do you feel around certain people? Going for what you want, not throwing tantrums, but getting your needs met. So
Mhm.
I love the fact that you bring that up, because I think that's an area, kids are just a set of many people that we can learn so much about.
Absolutely. And I think when you're watching kids, I think you spend more time just watching and allowing that space of observation. And I think that's what's missing in adult life and a lot of times in leaders' lives. There's a term, and it's in Hebrew music and Hebrew writing called sila,
Mhm.
and and it's that space between the notes, and it's just as important as the music. It's just important as the notes because it's asking us to stop, watch, understand before we move on to the next thing. So I think we're missing a lot of sila, for
I
lack of a
love
better
that.
word, in our lives.
No, I think that's a great word just because I don't think we have one.
I don't think
I
there's a
don't
word in English for that.
No, I mean, the closest I would say is mindfulness, which is more like a pause, but it's not about taking in what you see because mindfulness is kind of just being in the moment, but that one is kind of like if you're out somewhere and there is kind of talk or there is action, appreciating those moments where nothing is happening, where mindfulness is more kind of mostly when you're by yourself. But those quiet moments that you mentioned, I mean, I'm experiencing those more and more because I have three kids, a 6-year-old boy, a 3-year-old boy, and my 3-month-old daughter. And the best joys that I've encountered or experienced in the last couple of months is just watching them discover the world.
Absolutely.
Watching them discover the world, and it's made me better because it tells me to do that. It guides me to do that as an interviewer, kind of listening to people, a conversationalist, a
Hmm.
coach, a brother, like all of that stuff, because we get so wrapped up in thinking ahead, and I'm guilty of that as well.
Oh,
But
we all
there's
are.
just something about sitting back and letting these kids reteach you what the world is all about. New
Yeah,
experiences when they ask me questions that I know the answers to, or daddy, what's that? Or what is this person doing? Or what does that mean? Just seeing them take it in it's very therapeutic and it opens up my mind that I need to kind of get back to that wonder of just enjoying it through their eyes.
absolutely. And asking them what is it that they see, because what they see may have an opportunity to change your mind.
Because it's amazing how much we overcomplicate everything.
Oh, absolutely. We have over orchestrated our lives to the point where a message that was meant for us just goes beyond us, bounces off of us instead of going in us for us to consider. And whether we decide to hold it there or let it pass through, we're missing those opportunities on a regular basis, I believe.
Yeah. And I mean, we'll get to it in a couple minutes, but the book, one of the great things about this book that I realize is, or see, or read, is just how it talks about evolution, and just how we've evolved, but how part of us has evolved, but part of us hasn't. Right. We'll get
Hmm.
into that in a little bit, but it's what you said is how much we are overcomplicating everything. I mean, think about how much more complicated our lives are now with social media as opposed to 15 years ago before social media.
Absolutely.
So it's like we get lost in all the noise of the world and we take it all in, only though, regardless of the fact that only some of it really applies to us. All the other is like excess.
Yeah, and I'm curious. I know you read the book too, so I'm so curious about, and I'm sure we'll get there, what hit you, what you took in and what you're taking away. And
Yeah, no,
yeah,
oh yeah, we'll definitely dive into that. But okay, so aside from the work you're doing today, how is it that you ended up in this field? What is it from your past, whether it's family, friends, education, serendipity? What is it, if you could, from your way back when, that kind of led to now, even a path? You don't have to go day by day, but now that you are where you are and you love your work, what is it from your path that kind of set the stage for where you are now?
yeah, it's interesting, John, because I do believe I'm operating in my calling and in my purpose, and everything that I've experienced has led to this moment of in this type of work. And it's work, but it feels so much deeper than that.
Mm.
It feels more like a calling. um, I am one of seven children, so six girls and one boy, and my brother's the oldest, so I'm the oldest. And I remember being a kid and being intrigued by process and being intrigued by um, art and being intrigued by change. And I would create plays and give out roles and then conduct the roles and be the conductor of this whole thing. And then just watching the faces of the children that, and I was one. Maybe I didn't think I was a child back then, but I was a child, and watching the effect of what we were doing, the work we were doing on other people. And I think back then I was building my own value system. because I think everything that I do right now bounces through, comes through my values. And I actually got a tattoo. It says courage, connection, and freedom. So everything that I do, and when I could look back and analyze my life, everything has come through those three values, and those values are clear to me. But there was an executive coach who asked me one time, "Well, Karen, what does it mean to live them in all their forms?" And I didn't have an answer for him right then. I said, "I have to think about it." But when I came back, I said, "I have not only do I want them for me, I have to want them for other people. Not that I want them to have the same values, but what does courage, connection, and freedom mean to them? And am I willing to give space for that in the work that I do, in how I live, love, parent, and lead? All of them come through the window of values."
So yeah, and there's something to be said about that where they don't have to function or work the same way you do.
Hmm.
It's like when we say, find your tribe. I never say it's a tribe that just agrees with everything that you do,
That's right.
everything that you're about, but it's a tribe where you can flourish. There's probably more challenging in your tribe than anything else because it's a tribe that's about sharpening you. So I love that you kind of bring up that imagery. Um, okay, so you're that young. You're kind of
Hmm.
orchestrating presentations or plays, putting it together. Um, what did you do after that? Like, what was your education like, or where did you study? What did that look like?
So I have a degree in business administration, but I think the tipping point for me in this work, the work that I do right now, is I was at a Toastmaster conference, and it was out of state. And there was a woman on stage. Her name is Jenny Kravitz, who I know and I love and admire to this day. And she was on stage, and she was talking about this profession called coaching, and how in coaching she has the opportunity to help leaders navigate change, create change in their lives and their organizations. And I was mesmerized by what she was talking about. And I knew right in that moment, I said, that's it. Because I had never heard about coaching for a
Yeah,
profession. I said, that's
yeah.
it. So I chased her down after she got off the stage. I chased her down through the crowd. And I said, I have to talk to you. I want to know more about this coaching thing because that is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So we sat down and talked about it. And I found out she lived in the next town over.
Wow.
Come
I
on.
know. Oh, I know.
Yeah,
I
come
know. Out of
on.
all towns, right?
Out of all towns.
What
So
were
she
you?
was put in my path.
What profession or what kind of job were you working in right before you saw that presentation?
So I was working for a financial services company, and I had spent almost 30 years in that organization doing various jobs, but in change management, project management. And when I think about all those roles that I had in that organization, and I kind of grew up in the corporate arena, all of them were preparing me for what I do today. And I also actually co-created coaching and mentoring for leaders program for that organization because it was already burning. It was already burning. I started my coach training while I was working there, and that fire, when I was talking about the difference between motivation and inspiration, once that light, once you have that flame in your heart, you can't put it out. And I just couldn't put it out, and I had to do more and more and more of it. And I know that coaching and facilitating leadership training can change someone's trajectory in their career. And I said, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So that's what I do today. I consider myself almost in the book The Alchemist.
Oh yeah, I know it.
The leaders that I work with they have everything they need to be the best leader. My job is to help them go through that journey and find their juice, find their calling within that. And then once you find it, that fire is lit and you can't put it out.
Mm. Yeah. It's amazing how when you're working with somebody, regardless of whether it's a seasoned executive, somebody mid-career, or even a student, where you ask them questions, right? The nature of coaching starts with questions. The foundation is questions. But it's amazing. My favorite moment is always when somebody says, "No one's ever asked me that before."
That's right.
'Cause it's like, man, this kind of question is like what unlocks that thinking. And I've joked like, listen, I don't bring anything to the table. I don't give you anything new. I just open your eyes to what's already there and kind of help you sort it out. But it's amazing. I've learned during the pandemic that we're poor storytellers. We're not really good at showing who we are.
Hmm.
We think we are, but when it comes to it, most of us really aren't. And that, I mean, that was the driver for this particular series. So I can relate to your fascination with just being able to bring people out of who they've always been, but just kind of shining that light on
Absolutely.
it.
And I think in coaching, and John, the conversations that you have are just so intense because when we're coaching, we're not, they might have hired us to help them get to the next level and they're thinking about their role, they're thinking about titles, but true coaching is coaching the whole person. So what you're really doing is cracking people open. You're chiseling away at this wonderful piece of marble and helping them see who they are and who
Mhm.
they've stopped being or never
Yes.
were allowed to be.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you just bringing it to this conversation like that, I just imagine this wall that's kind of broken down between who they are in the office and who they are as a human.
Mhm.
And I've realized during the pandemic when there was more urgency in what people wanted to share, what they were talking about, what they wanted to be, it's amazing to realize. And we were talking about, children and toddlers and watching them go through life, just with that wild-eyed wonder. But it's amazing how many people, when they find peace, when they find happiness, when they find fulfillment, when they're working with you, how much it is about them going back to pick up who they were, that they left at the table, that they left at the front door because they thought they had to fit a job description and it looked a certain way. And I just did this the other day. I forget who I was on here with, but it was like, here's the job description. This is everything they have to offer. And then this is what they do. They meet the job description where it is and they leave. Maybe some people didn't hear it because I got away from the mic, but they leave so much behind them because they're trying to fit a job description that doesn't capture the greatness and value that they have.
Absolutely. I think we as coaches help people understand the concept of the difference between belonging and fitting in. Fitting in is being smushed into that, square hole when they're a freaking octagon or something along that line. So how do you allow them to be able to expand? Because if you're only just getting a tip of a person, you can imagine what could be if they're really feeling free. And there's definitely some vulnerability in that, to ask for what you need. There's vulnerability in that, but for leadership to allow it, I think that's the best space to possibly be in.
Have you seen, I mean, you don't have to give specific examples, but have you seen a shift in that? Or what kind of shift have you seen in your coaching during the pandemic?
So there's a number of things. The first thing is the fact that you're on Zoom. You're being invited into someone's home, and you have the opportunity to see the imperfection of their home, like something squirrely's going on in the background. The kids are interrupting
The
them.
cat walks across the
The
desk.
cat walks. So all that vulnerability, all those imperfect things happen where people, they have their facade and that facade comes
Yes.
down.
Yes.
That facade comes down. And once that facade comes down, you get to really see the real person for who they are. And that's where deeper coaching can occur. So I think that there's some definite benefits and some I'm grateful for, the pandemic because of that
Mhm.
allowance and also the time. I think people are allowing that sila, that it's happening. And I think people are being surprised by it. And when we hear the terms like the great quit or get the heck out of here, I'm bailing. Uh, I don't think it's I don't think it's so much a quit. I think it's more of an evolution. People are stopping and looking around at where they are and questioning where they are and saying, is this the best place for me? And they're allowing agency
Mhm.
by saying, this isn't the right place for me. Let me think about what I need. And it doesn't necessarily mean they have to leave an organization, but they're asking for what they need, which is different than what they are experiencing today.
What have you experienced yourself in the pandemic?
Well, what's really interesting, the first thing is I am a flaming extrovert. So, with that, when the pandemic started, most of my workshops were in person, or most of my work was in person. So I was like, oh my God, what's going to happen now that we have Zoom? And I was thinking maybe Zoom is going to be so impersonal. For me, I had to rethink, like even Adam Grant's book, Rethink
Mhm.
what work looked like and how do you create intimacy in a remote environment. And what I learned is that I kind of dig some introverted energy. All my friends that were introverts, they were loving it. And I was like, oh my God, how am I going to love this? But I changed. I changed. I started to adopt some of the benefits of introversion or the the space, that Sela. I think I even expanded my ability to just be with that space between the notes and things changed. I changed my business as a result of it and how I interact with people.
Uncomfortable?
You know what? At first, maybe,
Mhm.
but and even every once in a while it is uncomfortable. But I think discomfort is, Brene Brown says, discomfort is part of the ride. And if you're
Yeah.
not uncomfortable, I don't think you're growing. You're not supposed to be terrified every day,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, let's just
uncomfortable, yeah,
clarify. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
No, I agree, I agree. Um, Obviously, that's a conversation that comes up so often, comfort versus discomfort and,
Hmm.
how far you should stretch, but, I mean, if your blind spots aren't being tested, I mean, you just don't want something to catch you off guard later, no matter what it may be, whether it's personal, whether it's leadership, whether it's business, whether it's work. There's just something to it. Again, something that plays up in this book that we'll mention in a minute. We'll get started on the book in a minute, I swear. I just like picking Karen's brain, but there is something about that stress, that anxiety,
Hmm.
that it keeps you awake, it keeps you aware, and my appreciation for that has grown so much. I read the book, The Upside of Stress, a couple years ago, maybe a year before the pandemic. And then during the pandemic, obviously, we were all hit with a little more stress, a little more anxiety. And it opened up my mind to my own anxiety that was there all along, even before the pandemic. And just that, I've read about anxiety, what it is, the reptilian brain and survival. But there's just something about the way she put it in that book. Dr. Kelly McGonigal, and I apologize that I almost forgot her name, but there's just something about the way that she worded it and broke it down in the book that really put into perspective just how different we are than how we used to be. That we've been on this planet for millennia, right? In different iterations and different phases, Homo sapien, everything before. I've said before, I'm not an anthropologist, but it's amazing how long we've been on this planet. And in the last 15 years, again, this all goes back to social media and that immediate connectedness. It's just a completely different world. So we're working ourselves up over stuff that is not a primitive animal coming after us, is not a warring tribe coming after us, is not an enemy stalking us, like that daily survival. But we're just still programmed with that tightness of always being ready for that next thing. And it's insane.
Absolutely. And I think the challenges that we're having, even as a country and organization, is based in fear. And stress is, fear manifested. And it's not that it's impossible to live a life without stress, but we're stuck in the stress tunnel. And in the book Burnout, they talk about that. That's what happens when we get
Mm-mm.
stuck in the tunnel. We're not going through the tunnel. We have to find ways of finding our way through the tunnel, and I think we're just getting stuck in it and not
Yeah.
finding our way out.
So, Karen, in terms of courageous, what can you tell me about that title? What does it mean to you? When did you start seeing yourself as a courageous?
So I think I started seeing myself as a courageous when I realized I wasn't that courageous. So when I started doing Brene Brown's work, and I flew down to Texas to participate in her training, and I was, like I said, I was fangirling, and I was really excited about meeting her and meeting all the people that enjoyed her work. So I was really high on the thought of meeting Brene, and the thought of the work, but not at the level that we were going to experience it. And what I found in the training was that I wasn't as courageous as I thought I was, that I was creating soft landings for myself, meaning, I didn't like the idea of failing,
Mm,
because I wasn't raised to have failure as part of the equation, but failure is so necessary for success. You have to fail. If you haven't failed, then you're not really moving things that matter. And I realized at that point when I was in that training that I was creating soft landings for myself. And I said, I can't do that anymore. I have to change that way of thinking and way of being and become a courageist, which is someone who is in the practice of courage building, which doesn't mean that I have an absence of fear, that I have to find a way to do it in spite of that. So that's what a courageist is about. Someone that's willing to, go to the mat and do it even scared.
yeah. And I love the fact that you bring that up, that it's about an ongoing process. That it's not the assumption that you're full of complete, absolutely impenetrable courage and you have no fear and anything like
Oh
that.
no.
Because the crazy part is, I think people think when it comes to fear, when it comes to bravery, when it comes to courage, it's like all or nothing. Do you know what I mean? Like you have to completely get rid of the fear, completely get rid of your stress, that you have to have that facade. That word facade that you brought up is key, like what we think we should show versus just being a work of progress. We don't need to nail it 100% of the time. We don't need to nail it, at any given moment. I think we're scared of being works in process. Going back to what you mentioned, that fear of failure. Anything
Absolutely.
shy of 100% attainment or achievement of a goal or whatever you set out to do, that's what we're just programmed to do, to show. This isn't really a society. I mean, I hear this conversation more and more, but I wish it was more of a society where that work in progress, those attempts, that trial and error, was more the rule rather than the exception.
Yeah, I think and I don't even know if we've lost the ability to be in partnership with fear. I don't know if we ever really had it. There's some people, of course, that have had a relationship with fear and they understand it and they can do it. But I think collectively as a society, I think that is the basis of many of the challenges that we have. We're fearful of this, fearful of that. So we want to avoid, we want to protect, and therefore we don't learn, we don't love. There's so many things that are affected by fear.
Yeah, that's a good point you bring up, that we don't learn and we don't love. Like, aside from what we lose out ourselves because of fear, it's amazing what society loses out on by us not sharing who we are. Me,
That's right.
you, whoever it may be.
That's right.
Not to say it's all about us, but we forget about the value that we can share with others, because I think we think it society, business, work has a certain script. Maybe I don't quite fit in there. We hold back. It's just amazing, that sigh of relief that people can show, can give, when they finally, like, holy shit, I can be myself. I can bring this to the
Absolutely.
table. Like, it's this tension that kind of just lifts off their shoulders.
Absolutely. It's a spark. And when we talk about a spark, that lights others, and that difference between motivation and inspiration was from Lance Secretan. He wrote the book that sparked the flame in the torch. And when you can ignite other flames, there's little fires like everywhere. And one fire begets another fire, begets another fire. Because you know what it's like to be on a team where inspiration is part of the team. You enjoy going to work. You come up with amazing ideas because there's a collective body of people that are in it for that, instead of holding back or fearful of this, fearful of that. Yeah, I think it's absolutely necessary for creativity.
And I mean that leads right into the book. So why don't you give us an introduction to the book, or you can introduce those listening and watching to the book that we're going to be covering,
Okay.
and how you
So the
came across it as well as you could, if you could.
Yeah, I can. So this book is called A Culture of Safety, and it's by Alla Weinberg. Yes. And I happen to I have not worked with Alla, but we've worked on the same team. And in one of our meetings, she mentioned that she had written a book, and it's a little book, it's a booklet,
Hmm.
and that she was going to send us a book for each of us to take a look at it. And I'm like, sure. So I get the book, and it's a little book, and what really appealed to me in the upper corner says it's a 30-minute read. I am all about a 30-minute read.
Yeah,
I
I
can be
saw
a
that.
summary girl, I can be an audible girl, and I'm thinking, ooh, a book that's going to save me time.
Yeah.
But what this little booklet has done, it has changed my mind about so many things. And when we talk about rethinking, this booklet has made me rethink a lot of things. And it's not so much A Culture of Safety, the title, but underneath the title, it says building a work environment where people can think, collaborate, and innovate. That right there spoke to my heart. So when I was talking about being a smurgeologist and pulling from different things, that right there woke me up. And I think this book is one of the most important books I've read on culture. I give it to my clients. I give it to anyone who's willing to listen to me talk about this book, because it is absolutely impactful. Because I think in order for people to do their best work, safety has to be a component of it. People have to be seen, heard, valued, and belong, or you're not getting the best work out of them. So this book really touched my heart, and it touched me professionally.
Yeah, it's a great book for that very reason because as I can imagine you've seen in your work, I've come across as a coach and as a worker, just throughout my career, instances where people knew they should be speaking up for whatever good needed to be achieved, whatever time needed to be saved, resources that could be saved. They knew that they should be speak or they wanted to speak up, but they felt like they couldn't. Um, and this gets the book gets into why workplaces are the way that they are. Like, even though people are very educated now, there's a lot of that industrial era mentality where it's like manager versus workforce,
Exactly.
but there's just so much that's left on the table. We've talked about fear in the last couple minutes and what people hold back, and I was talking about that as a person, as a worker. But this gives good examples and gives good insight into what the cost is of people not feeling that they can speak up. You and I are leadership junkies. We read all about leadership. Uh, but even if you're a leadership junkie or not, anybody listening or watching knows those environments where somebody was the leader and they were inviting, they were open, they were curious, versus one that was kind of shut off, not diplomatic. It was more of a dictatorship. It was about their record with their own bosses. And we've seen, if you can think back, you've probably seen the difference that it made in the people that were working there. People that were just kind of held back. They came in, worked their hours, got their paycheck, and left, versus people that were allowed to just breathe. You know,
Absolutely.
at the very beginning, it's just a matter of just kind of like breathing out. It's incredible that it just starts with that release of that tension, and then you can get to that work.
Yeah, I think this book is for absolutely for leaders and organizational development professionals, so they can understand the environment that they're creating for their folks, but it's also a great book for individuals who are struggling to try to articulate what is missing for
Mm.
them in their organization. Maybe they love their job. Maybe they want something to change about their job and they can't find a way to articulate what it is that they need. I think this book may help give them the language that they need to have a conversation with their manager, supervisor, or whatever, and give them the opportunity to listen, hear them out, and maybe make change or not. So I think it has far-reaching um, application.
Yeah. Um, and just to get to first and foremost, just obviously there are definitions in there. You want to make sure that you're setting what the words are, what it means,
Mhm.
and for instance, one that I pulled out, Karen, in chapter 3 is the definition of fear. Um, like what it means because you want to get into what that fear is, what it looks like before you can discuss how to resolve it, how to fix it. There's a lot of great exercises. There's an inventory in the book. So it goes through this. I love the fact that it starts with again that primitive nature that we have. So it breaks
Mhm.
down where that stress comes from, how it manifests itself, why it manifests itself in our psyches, why we feel that fear, why we feel that stress. But this says that the right from the book, the opposite of safety is fear, a deep-rooted fear that our basic human needs for safety and security, connection and love, control and autonomy will not be met and we will perish. Like that sound like we will perish. Those sound like heavy words. Some people may say, well, it's the workplace. What are you talking about? Perish. But when you're in the workplace, everybody has to various levels facades, right? They're there to do their work, so they put on their worker face.
That's right.
But some people may feel that fear differently. Like it can
Absolutely.
strike them to the core. It can strike them to the core where they feel debilitated, where they feel like they can't speak up. That they may have their stuff organized in the workplace, deliver the work, but then they're going home with an ulcer. They're
Absolutely.
going home. Obviously, mental health has the awareness of mental health has picked up even more during the pandemic, and it was on its way to getting there even pre-pandemic. But I think to some people, this book would probably be like, I don't understand where this is coming from. Like at work, we all get it done. Everybody shows up, they get their work done. But I don't think people really realize how different we are in how we digest the environment and the energy that we get from those environments.
Yeah, I think you're 100% true there. It's because I don't think we have conversations.
Mm,
I think we like to believe that everything is okay. And what you described in that definition of fear, there could be a death of spirit, a death of joy that can kill an organization. And even though in this small book some of the words are heavy, I think they're meant to be heavy. And I
mhm.
think we're at that point where if businesses don't pay attention, we do so at our peril. And even in when you were talking about fear, there was another piece in there. It says to understand the nature of fear is to understand that it's not something you get rid of, suppress, push through, or avoid, but something that you turn towards, stay with, and invite.
Yes. Yeah.
So we don't, and it talks about the Western culture that we just push it aside. But if we push it aside, it comes back in various forms. So when you're doing your surveys and you see people are not happy, it's coming back. It's coming back. And if your people are out sick a lot, it comes back in the nature of illness. And in the other book, it's the body keeps score. I think we keep score. We take mental score of
Mm.
scars, of fear or bias. Those are mental scars that stay with us, and they're gonna come out somewhere.
Yeah, it's amazing how something like this, setting this kind of environment should be something that you should do because it's just like the right thing to do by people, treating people right. At its very core, at its very nature, treating people right. But even if you don't think like that, think about what it does to your business. Think about the opportunity cost of not heeding this kind of conversation. Um, Obviously, you don't need to list specifics, but have you seen those kind of environments where companies didn't heed that warning, didn't pay attention? Maybe they were stuck in that industrialist mindset and the workplace kind of faltered because of that?
I would say absolutely yes, and I think we're experiencing it, and we're calling it the big quit, and we're doing all kinds of analysis and trying to figure out why are people leaving, and I think in many cases though that has that's been too late. But I think if organizations got in front of that and started having conversations with people and asking them, what is it that you need for you to do your best work? I think that they would be shocked at the answers, even a simple question like that. And creating an environment where people can tell the truth about that. I think
Yeah.
that that could go that could really impact the business on on the good side.
Yeah, I've always found it remarkable that businesses traditionally have thought that the only way to kind of implement change is compensation, that we don't have the resources, right? We don't have the resources for this crazy training. We don't have the resources for raises and promotions, but they forget about the language. They forget about the attitude. They forget about the example that they set. And it's just amazing how that's all it takes for the most part, just to get that going. It's amazing how many people I've worked with where they just wanted acknowledgement of their good work. You know what I
That's
mean? They
right.
said, yes, a promotion would be great. Yes, a raise, of course, for my family, for myself would be great. But I just want to hear that, I'm doing a good job. I just want to hear that they appreciate what I brought to the table. Like, and for fear, of sounding ridiculous with the cliche, but it's like low hanging fruit. It's the stuff that you can start without major initiatives, major resources.
Yeah. At the end of the day, people want to be seen, heard, and valued. And honestly, in the absence of that, chaos could ensue, and just a workplace where people are just not coming to the table with all that they're capable of doing. And when they talk about can we talk about the three levels of safety
Absolutely.
real quick?
Absolutely. Please.
So what I loved, and there's so many things I love about this book, but when Allah describes the three types of safety, I think this applies to work, families, relationships. I don't think there's a single relationship that we have that this doesn't apply to. So, physical safety, the shared belief that everybody is valued, respected, and included. Emotional safety, the shared belief that all emotions are valid and the expression of any emotion is welcome. And three, psychological safety, the shared belief that no one on the team will embarrass or punish anyone else for admitting a mistake, asking a question, or offering a new idea. Who today that has a business, that's running a business, that has um, the ability to make decisions for the business would say any of those, are not necessary for the workplace? There may be a little bit of challenge on the emotional safety because when I first read that one, I'm like, what does that mean? People are going to be crying every day in the workplace. That's not what that means. But emotions, we're emotional beings. We make decisions on emotions. We do a lot of things based off of emotions. So to act like we as human beings check that at the door is not responsible and it's not realistic.
Yeah.
Because when someone shows emotion, there's data in that emotion. There's things we need to pay attention to in that emotion. And if we allowed it and really heard people, heard it out, and then we can do something about it instead of acting like it doesn't exist.
Yeah, I love the fact that you refer to it as data. You're getting insight into the vein of your organization, your group, your team. It's giving you insight as to what's there, and if your mind is open to accepting it, you can seek to find a resolution. But yeah, there are maybe old schoolers or maybe younger people that just don't think this way and they think it's a lot of woo stuff, like it's too emotional. The workplace is to get things done. But like you said, it's at their own peril if they don't if they don't heed that warning. Um, what was the other? There was a statistic that was in there somewhere. Actually, I think it was something that Brene had shared somewhere in her work.
Oh, I think I
Um,
know what you're talking about.
that in her work, she found that only 10% of organizations have operationalized their values into teachable and observable behaviors that are used to hold people accountable. Um, yeah, I just think there's so much of a mentality that we're supposed to work hard. We're supposed to put our nose to, or our face, our body to the grindstone and just go. So when you talk about all this stuff that isn't necessarily tangible, that doesn't deliver the profits explicitly, right? That it's not a tool that you can actually use in hand. People don't think about behaviors and emotions, and just the fact that only 10% of organizations have kind of put that kind of attention to it is it's a shame. But I mean, I think we're working in the right direction. If things that you read online, articles, journals, things like that, are any indication, there is more of that conversation coming up.
I 100% agree. And I think that Brene Brown is accurate in that. And additional thing I love about this book is that its intention is not to shame. This
Exactly.
attention is to make you aware. And in some organizations, maybe it's a warning. Maybe it's a warning to pay attention to things that matter. It's because relationships matter. Relationships are what create culture, or a lack of relationship is what creates culture. On page 14, this I love this. There's so many things that I've starred. It says, when safety is compromised, people begin to protect themselves by holding back ideas, feelings, and thoughts. They create relationship workarounds, which take up a lot of emotional and mental energy that could be used towards learning, building, and innovating the business. So we're navigating, broken relationships and trying to tell leaders what we think they want to hear instead of what they need to hear. So creating a culture where truth can happen, hard truth can happen, is the way to break open our business, because our businesses have changed. Our businesses have changed, and without creating cultures that acknowledge that change, you just go down the same path.
Yeah, and again, it's like the one thing I want to stress is just that it can happen in language. It can happen in gestures.
That's right.
And she goes through various exercises that you can apply or put in place in the workplace to kind of address each of those the safeties that you outlined. And a lot of it is led through language. A lot of it is just kind of the tone that you set in the workplace. And I didn't know, Karen, if you had any specific ones that jumped out to you that you really liked. But I love that she mentions David Marquette and a book that he had written. I know he does a lot of work with language and leadership. This is one book, Karen. I don't know if you've read it. Leadership is Language.
No, I'm going to have to read that.
This is a good book. She talks about David Marquette in the book. This one is about, and it gives an example of a Navy ship that's going through the Caribbean, and the tone that the leader sets at the time leading up to this kind of fork in the road or ocean is one where people don't feel safe. So it talks about what was said, what could have been said to set the environment for people to feel safe, to share their observations about what was going to go wrong. So I highly recommend that book because what I've loved about learning about leadership and what I've loved about learning in this book regarding safety is how much it exists in people sharing it in their language, setting the example that aside from compensation, aside from workshops, aside from other resources, you don't even need to have a formal workshop to inject this, infuse this into your environment, that it can all be in the language that you use. I think even whether as a leader or somebody, as you said, read this book, even if you are the worker, because something in your demeanor, something in your language, people will catch on to that. So what I love about this is that language is so powerful that you don't need all those crazy resources that it's just like the word, it's like the human communication that you can have from day in and day out.
Absolutely. I love the fact that towards the back of the book, she gives some really good ideas on how to implement new ways to talk in meetings that can open up conversations. You know, not stopping at a final, decision or a final idea, and inviting discussion around what should we consider instead of that, and making that part of a meeting instead of having someone feel like their ideas are being picked apart, or having people feel like they're getting points for picking apart someone else's idea. So how do you normalize um, criticism in a way that's productive, and then that's just part of the process? And to your point, John, it's in the language. It's in the language, and I think we have completely underestimated the importance of language and build in the in its ability to create environments
Mm.
where people can do their best work.
Karen, is there a particular exercise, whether it's in one of the safeties or if you have a favorite in each of the safeties, the physical, the emotional, the psychological, that stands out as great, or they're all good, but are there ones that stand out for you?
The one that stands out to me the most is probably the emotional
Okay.
safety, because I think that's where we have the biggest hiccup when we take a look at all three of those, because we as a culture, as a country, we we've made heroes out of people, stiff upper lip and don't you cry and all that kind of thing. So trying to unpack and rethink what that looks like, I think is a big deal. So how do you create the space for emotional safety where that's not inviting a cry fest? So just it's
Yeah.
not a cry fest, because when people go, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
Even me, I'm like, no, I'm not going to have a cry fest. But this book is not about having a cry fest. Is being able to have those conversations with people where their truth can come out in ways that may be different than what you expect, but different. But we need to start having one-on-one conversations with people to create that environment where that can happen. So I think having one-on-one connections, I think, are critically important to the work that we do today and for leaders.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many good tidbits in here. And this Leadership as Language, the book that I just showed you and told you about, Karen, is a great book. But it's like this little handy "A Culture is Safer" booklet that we're talking about goes into it, cuts through like all of these pages in this other book and just gets right to the point without sacrificing any quality at all. It doesn't go through the long story of leadership as language, but it's such a good book because it gets to the meat of why we're programmed this way, what it looks like, what it costs us, and then taking steps where you can resolve it and just turn things around.
Absolutely. I think it's one of the best investments. So if you have the ability to buy this book for the leaders in your organization and even just have a book discussion over it, I think that there's going to be change within your organization. I'm not guaranteeing that everybody would change, or even at the same time, but I think people be fundamentally different as a result of reading this book.
I mean, I think people that maybe don't feel that safety in their workplace, even if somebody brings up this conversation, um, even if somebody brings up the fact, hey, listen, this is something that we can look into, or we're going to check out this book, we're going to have a conversation about it. Even somebody getting a heads up that your organization is going to start looking into safety, what it means. Here's just kind of a breakdown and outline of what the book covers. Even that is reassuring. It's like that acknowledgement that I mentioned before. As long as they're aware that you're thinking about it and considering it, that's enough to kind of hold them over. Now they know that you're taking the environment seriously, that it's not just, you know, full steam ahead without any kind of consideration to the day in and day out.
Absolutely. And there's so many good quotes in this book that if you started a meeting and you put one of Allah's quotes at the top of your meeting agenda, I bet you would have better attendance than you've ever had. because
Yeah.
people are going to want to know, what does that mean? What does that lovely quote mean? And what does it mean to me and this organization?
Yeah. And then there was one other thing that I wanted to cover. I think it was, yeah, page 38. Um, Da, 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 da. Yeah, that this mentality, what it can lead to, this old school mentality of managers versus workers, that it's all about the productivity, it's all about what's delivered, that there's no human behind, it's just kind of like the employee numbers. But this is what that mentality is that kind of blocks this kind of discussion from taking place. And it lists like the understanding that people are lazy, that people work primarily for money, that people are selfish, that they need to be told what to do, that only leaders are capable of making good decisions. All of these are old school mentalities that, Karen, I'm sure as much as I have, you've seen it in the workplaces that you've kind of gone into. Not
Mhm.
all of them, but it's amazing how much that lingers. That people do not want to be responsible for their actions or for decisions that affect the economic performance of the company. It's like, what kind of bullshit is that?
This right
You,
here, this list is like a giant ego list. And
yeah,
if there's any in here that resonate with you, I suggest you dial right now and go to Amazon and get this book.
dial in right now. Get this
Dial it
book
right up. Dial it right up and get this book.
as seen on TV.
Yeah, because when it says people don't leave organizations, but people leave managers, I think right now, I think they're leaving both.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Yeah, I've heard that said, and it all depends which organization, it all depends which manager. But
Yeah,
yeah, I wouldn't say it's just the manager, it's just the organization. You have to have, like you said, you mentioned the interconnectivity of all these different things in your life. There's interconnection between the organization, which may be amazing or not, the manager, which may be amazing or not. What does that look like? Is
that's
there
right.
hope for that manager? Are they going to open their eyes? So it just looks so different. There are so many factors at play for all of us.
Absolutely. And can I read one more piece?
Please.
So it says an organization, this is on page 15, an organization that doesn't have a culture of safety, a culture in which people face microaggressions, withhold emotions, avoid conflict, stay silent, shy away from risk, will not only be unable to address complexity, but will also lack the agility to respond to the constant changes business face every day. Yeah, we're in a new arena, and businesses and leaders have to understand that the landscape has changed.
Yeah.
And are you going to be ahead of that or catch up to it? Or are you going to stay where you are and watch your business fizzle out unnecessarily?
Unnecessarily. Yeah.
Unnecessarily.
Because you think back to like the Enrons, right? Where businesses were corrupt financially, right? Enron, Tyco, WorldCom, all that from like the early 2000s. Um, and there's always going to be issues with companies. But now you're seeing more and more, and probably because of social media, especially because of social media, you're seeing the BS that companies are putting out there that they're doing. And it's amazing that companies don't understand. Listen, everything that you do, I think about this as a customer. If I have a bad customer experience, I wonder why would they do that knowing that somebody can go home on social media and share the toxicity, the poor service that they experienced in this conversation. And where I'm trying to go with that is that you still have very publicly, this isn't even a private thing that we don't know where it's happening.
That's right.
There was that company where the CEO laid off a couple hundred people over Zoom. How did you not? Why did you think that no one was going to hear about it? Or maybe you're just so arrogant that you think it's power and people will respect it, but that's going to get out. And the stock, the moral stock of your company is going to go down.
That's right.
Or Elon Musk saying something like, listen, get back to the factory or get back to the office. I think he said it over Twitter or about Twitter as well. Enough of the remote work. If you don't want to come back to the office, you're out. But there are just so many instances where a company can be doing well. And in some instances, not like that, the layoffs, right? There's business decisions that have to be made, but it's like pouring salt onto a wound if you're laying people off because of business, or it's just a smack of disrespect, of just arrogance, if you're saying something so publicly, like you don't care who's going to see that. And nowadays with sustainability and social entrepreneurship and people being more responsible about where they're spending their dollars, again, if you don't see it as a human need, as a human connection, as a human conversation, pay attention, because people will vote with their wallet. In this
Absolutely.
case, right? They'll vote with their morality, what they believe is right, and they will go somewhere else.
Absolutely. 100% agree. And I think this work of creating cultures and changing, like you're having that moral fiber, um, is an evolution. So you're going to get on the horse and you're going to fall, you're going to get back up, but people will give you grace if they see that you're really working at this. Um,
Yes.
yeah,
Like you said about being a couragist, you don't have to nail it 100%.
that's
Like
right.
that effort, the work, and especially workers, if they see you're genuinely and authentically, as you mentioned, is very important, working in the right direction, asking the right questions, just effing curious, they will stick around. But just show us something. Show us you're
That's right.
working. You don't need to get it perfectly. Maybe they're waiting to pull the trigger until it's completely perfect.
That's right.
Obviously, a lot of them just don't care, but just show them something, and they will show you that they're patient enough, because they see you're trying to work in the right direction.
And that's what Brene Brown was saying about our, having mission statements and value statements that don't mean anything. People want to see them in action. So don't just go and buy this book and send it out to your leaders and saying, read this, I think it's going to help. But what actions are going to come from this? And how are you going to lead by example?
Yes.
You're the one that creates the culture at the top. And so your responsibility is probably greater than your employees. So what are you going to do that shows that this stuff is real?
Yeah, you can't just say, "Hey, HR is going to be putting out this policy in the coming months. I'm behind it, and we'll check in a year." Like, they really need to see you as the face, or else
That's
they're,
right.
they're like, it's not for him or her. All right,
That's
fine. I
right.
know it's not going to go anywhere. So yeah, and it's awesome you brought up Brene, because I was going to ask you, maybe putting you on the spot. This is Karen's choice. Which book should I start with
Ooh.
of Brene's?
Well, for Bernays, if you're in organizations, Dare to Lead is the place to start because it is an accumulation. It's kind of the smurgeologist of all her books in one.
Here,
And
where did that? Let me jump in. Where did that word come from? I
I think
know
I
I
made
know
it
what it
up.
means, but
Yeah,
I'm
like
like, should I ask what smurge is? Would I sound like an idiot if I
no,
ask her what's
submerging just means to pull together. And then I was
okay?
doing a presentation. I'm sure it was at a LGH, and I go, "What is that? What do I do?" I said, "I think I'm a smurgeologist."
Okay, okay.
So I think for
So is it like,
organizations,
I think it's like what? Smush and merge? Smurge?
yes, smush and merge. So that's like putting everything together. Like, oh my God, that when you're reading something,
Pieces.
because when you're reading your books, don't you go, "Oh, I remember that in another book. Let me
Oh
read that,"
yeah,
or
yeah,
"I saw
yeah.
that on a podcast." John, you're
Yeah.
a smurgeologist.
Yeah. I'm learning I'm a lot of different things through this
You're a
series. Just
smurgeologist.
everybody's own vocabulary, or no, that's true. Like, I always make a note that this saying or this paragraph is like this book that broke it down a little differently. And people always say, why do you read so much of the same kind of thing? But everybody has their own language.
Everyone has their own language, and I think that's the genius of Brene. And another recommendation is her newest book, um,
Atlas.
Atlas of the Heart.
Okay.
It's not a book where you just read it from soup to nuts, except for people like you and me. We'll read it from soup to nuts because we're just like junkies like that.
Yeah.
But this has like I think between 85 and 87 different descriptions of emotions.
Wow.
And I think it's so important to understand emotions because some of them present the same. So understanding the emotions, if you're going to create an environment where emotions are welcome, understand what people are bringing coming to the table with. Don't make assumption about the emotion that you think that they're feeling or expressing. Ask them. And this book gives definitions of emotions that are so juicy and so beautiful where you go, wow.
Yeah.
I think this is a must have for definitely for people like you and me,
Okay.
um, but lots of coaches too.
I'm going to start with that one and then I'll bring you back and we can discuss it.
Oh, yeah, I would love to.
In wrapping up, Karen, is there anything that I might have missed? Is there anything you want to mention from the book? I know there's a lot of good tidbits in there. Is there anything that else that you wanted to mention of the book or yeah,
The
the book
only
itself? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the book in itself is a wonderful manual, and even though it's a small book, it packs a punch. So if you are the leader of people, a leader of processes, um, a leader of anything, you don't even have to be a leader of people. It is a must have.
Like you said, it applies even if you're even to your personal life. It's about relationships. It's
It is
about
all about relationships,
yeah.
and relationships are what drives the country, drives the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah, actually, you connected me and Alla, and we spoke. She's gonna sit down with me for a conversation on this book, and she's like, "Ah, but if Karen's gonna speak about it, do you still want me to come on and talk?" I'm like, "Absolutely," because I think,
Absolutely.
especially even if she wasn't the author, I like getting different perspectives and people take away different things. Again, same with a book. If it's the same topic as three other books, somebody's gonna put it in their own tone, their own words, their own experiences. So she knows how much you appreciate this book. So thank you for introducing me to the book as well as Allah.
Okay, you're welcome. And like I said, the book is a gift. It's an absolute gift.
Yeah. It's like I said, I've read similar books, but the fact that this is packed from cover to cover is a short read and it's got history, exercises, inventories, examples of what it looks like, Karen, the way we just went through that list where people are like, all right, is that my workplace or not? It'll give you examples of what that may look like and what you're losing out if that is the case.
That's right.
Karen, is there anything else you want to share about your work or what you're up to these days or anything you have coming up?
So what I'm up to these days is a lot of connecting. So I would say right now I'm spending a lot of time connecting, whether I'm doing work for individuals or whether I'm doing work for organizations. It all begins with a conversation. So please reach out to me. You can use my website to contact me there or through LinkedIn. I would love to have a conversation with you over fika, fika meaning coffee, and then just get to know you because that's how my work gets done, getting to know people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I've mentioned it how my networking has gotten better during the pandemic, Karen, just because obviously there was more on the line. You really didn't get a sense for where the pandemic was going. So each of my interactions are just a little deeper, a little not that I've never been good at small talk. I can do small talk, but I everything has just been richer because of the circumstances in which we find ourselves.
Exactly.
So it's incredible to think that most of the people that I've interviewed for this series, I haven't even met in person. I met them during the pandemic. So that just shows you that if you reach out to people and just have a conversation and kind of say, yeah, what can I learn from you? What can you learn from me? We underestimate that. And it seems simple, but it's powerful.
I 100% agree. And you and I, we have to meet in person, somewhere along the way. So we're going to have
Absolutely.
to make that happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I look forward to it.
All right. Sounds good.
So thank you, Karen, for covering a culture of safety, building a work environment where people can think, collaborate, and innovate. I think it's more powerful than ever. I think it's more timely than ever, especially
Oh,
with what you mentioned, the great quit, the great resignation, whatever moniker you may use for it. These days, it's just companies, they have power, but people are going to hold them to a greater accountability standard. So this kind of book kind of allows them to get in front of that and make sure that they're taking the right steps. So thank you for bringing it to my attention.
all right. It is my pleasure. And thank you for bringing me on. I always love to talk about a good book.
Thanks, Karen. If there's anything that I might have missed in talking to Karen, if you've read the book and thought I should have brought up a different point, or Karen should have mentioned something, or something that we completely overlooked, let me know. Shoot a message to me. Let me know what that is. I'll shoot it to her and get her take on it. But in the meantime, till the next episode, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.